Okay, I know we're still waiting for some folks to join us today, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, welcome to everyone who is here. My name is Catherine Zobri. I'm a general business advisor with the Alabama Small Business Development Center. We provide one-on-one, no-cost business advising services to Alabama small businesses. And that's really what Rebound Birmingham is about. It is a collaborative effort driven by Rev Birmingham, who is a place-based vibrancy organization focused on making Birmingham the absolute best place that it can be to live and to work and to play. And you as small business owners are a huge part of that. And so before I introduce our amazing speakers today, a couple sort of housekeeping things. First of all, these slides will be available. We are recording this presentation, and we're going to send out a follow-up email. I think we send them out either today or tomorrow to really give you the information, because it's going to be like drinking out of a fire hose, I'm sure. Feel free to drop questions in the chat as we're going along. I'll be moderating the chat, so if there's something that you don't understand, feel free to direct message me if it's something that you're like, ooh, I should know that, but I don't. Or just shoot it out to the group. This is a safe place, this is a safe space to understand more about how we can improve diversity and equity. And with that, I want to introduce our amazing speakers today. And so the order on the screen, I'm going to go backwards. So I want to very briefly introduce Melva Tate, who is one of the most dynamic leaders in small business in the Birmingham area. She brings over 2 decades of experience to the table as an experienced and certified life coach and certified in HR, as well as a host of other things that are so useful to small business owners today, such as she's a speaker and facilitator, and all of the different certifications that she brings. And so her plethora of skills really condensed down to being a master networker. And if I'm a little bit tongue-tied, it's because she's kind of a famous person in my world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Melva. Alicia Levelsmore with ASL Creative is the absolute epitome of entrepreneurship in my book. She is one of the most dynamic entrepreneurs that I know and really focuses on the heart of problems, not just in Birmingham or Alabama, but in the whole country. She is actively solving the racial wealth gap through supporting small business owners in project management and in program management. And if you missed our launch, her presentation gave me goosebumps. It was amazing. And so a lot of the energy that I get from, that I'm experiencing right now is from the launch party that she threw for us, basically. And then finally, Elijah Davis with Urban Impact. I have only amazing things to say about Elijah. He and I have worked together on a couple different projects, and he's a native of Alabama. He is centered around focusing on strategic growth management for Urban Impact, and basically that's a community development organization. He's got both the academic as well as the real world experience that he's bringing to this table, and you will not hear a more articulate person, more thoughtful person discuss the matters that we're talking about today. Elijah is somebody that I look up to for many aspects of entrepreneurship, and it is an absolute honor to introduce our speakers today. So without further ado, I turn it wholly over to them, and thank you so much for being here and participating on this presentation with us today.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for those amazing introductions. Like, thank you so much. We appreciate that. And so we just appreciate you for the introductions. We thank Rev and all the other partners for putting this together. And so we just want to welcome all the participants here. And we're excited to dive into some of the conversations that we plan on having today. So Melva's going to kick us off, and then Elijah, he's going to take over. And then I'll kind of wrap us up with a few of my thoughts around diversity and equity and it being fiscally responsible. So Melva, if you want, you can go ahead and get us started.
Awesome. So again, Catherine, thank you so much for the glowing recommendation. I need to get a copy of that so I can make sure I share that with everybody else. That was so warm and welcoming. But listen, we're talking about something that is in my wheelhouse, talking about diversity, inclusion, and positioning diversity and inclusion as a key component of your organization and your organization's success. So I've got about 20 plus years working in the space of diversity and inclusion. And so whether that is helping organizations establish a diversity statement and live through that statement, helping them recruit and retain talent based on their diversity commitment, whether that is helping them establish diversity committees or establishing a diversity blueprint. The list goes on, including investigating workplace issues of discrimination and also coaching managers on cultural sensitivity and how to handle diversity issues within their workplace. So this is my wheelhouse. And having had an opportunity to work with organizations like the United Way of Central Alabama, Mercedes-Benz, and even one of our state's new professional sports team, the Huntsville Trash Pandas, all of these vast experiences and all of these unique organizations have given me an opportunity to really sharpen my saw in this area. So as I mentioned, I've been in this space for a long time. And if you can see from the slide, we have been talking about diversity and inclusion for a number of years. And, you know, it started back in the 60s after the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when Lyndon B. Johnson put in place that it was unlawful to discriminate against people in the workplace. And then you saw in the 70s and 80s, the government put a little bit more teeth around diversity and inclusion, well, primarily diversity in the workplace, ensuring that organizations who got government funding actually went out and tried to hire minorities and women and veterans. And then in the 90s, we start talking more about diversity, not just EEO, but diversity in the workplace, and broaden that definition to include religion and cultural differences in the LGBT community. And so today forward, we're talking more about not just diversity, which is a fact, but inclusion, which is intent and action to do something around how those unique personalities show up in our workplace and how we can leverage and benefit them as they mirror our marketplace and who we serve and who we work with. So we've had an evolution, but yeah, we're still talking about it today. Next slide, please. I love to say that my true definition of diversity is that it's a mosaic of people who bring a variety of backgrounds and styles and perspectives and values and beliefs as assets to the groups and organizations for which they interact. They're not obstacles, they're not challenges, but they are truly assets if we allow those individuals who enter our workspace to show up as their authentic selves. So me being a girl from Winona Projects right here in Birmingham, who now live in the suburbs on a cul-de-sac, I must say, when I'm sitting at the board table, I am bringing all of those experiences and growing up in urban Birmingham and living a suburban lifestyle and all of my lived experiences from being in the military and everything else to that table and to those decisions and conversations that we have. Next slide, please. So I want you, as we go through this discussion, to just think about not just diversity of characteristics, but more so diversity of thought. So, and going back to that definition that I just shared. So one of the things that you need to do in being successful in your organization as a small business, broaden the D definitions. Because oftentimes when people hear the word diversity, it almost paralyzed them. It's like, uh-oh, what we do wrong? What do we need to talk about? Oh my gosh, this is gonna be a crucial conversation. And it really is not if we broaden the definition of D. And so diversity can include all of those different aspects, not just race and gender. And so certainly race is a hot topic now because we see the social unrest that's going on in our country, but you should broaden the definition and broaden the terms that you use around diversity so people don't automatically think that you're talking about a dash of color here or a sprinkling of women here and there. It's more than just race and gender. The other thing is to really keep diversity and inclusion top of mind. How do you do that? Well, you do it by the things that you say. What matters most to you? So most organizations will talk about sales and customers and our quality of our product, all of those things, but they rarely bring up diversity as a key point of discussion. So my recommendation, if you're setting the agenda and you're talking about sales and you're talking about customer contact or you're talking about marketing, put diversity on the agenda as well so that it can be top of mind and not a passing thought within your organization. Because most people view diversity as an event and not an embedded part of who they are and how they service their partners and customers. And that's why I say, just do it. Don't say it, just do it. Again, our organizations have created and crafted some really snazzy position statements around diversity and inclusion, but have you put it into action? And certainly for those organizations who came out after the tragic death of George Floyd and put together a social justice statement, your employees or your customers are expecting you to live through that now, not just in words, but in actions as well. So it's so important that you take what you put on paper and what you say and actually bring it to life. How do you do that? Through hiring and training and promotions, and even some of your community work that you do. And then the other thing I want you to think about is the die. And I know that sounds bad, but you're going to die. Accountability is all in the die. And the die is diversity, inclusion, and equality. So think of that. If I don't do these things, my organization could possibly die or not be as vibrant as it could be if I were doing those things that are important. So I want you to think about accountability for you and the leaders within your organization. You know, you want to make your mission statement clear. And certainly for those who may be in a leadership role, you all need to be singing from the same page. So that is why it's so important to ensure that everybody knows exactly what your statement is around diversity and inclusion. You need to train people on what that means for you. You know, just like parenting, we all have different parenting styles and experiences. Certainly people may bring their experiences from another organization and automatically assume that's what your culture, that's what you want your culture to look like when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So again, you've got to make it plain and make sure people are singing from the same sheet of music. And that is why training is so important. You got to make sure you are modeling that behavior as a leader within your organization and every person who's a leader within your organization, because again, people won't remember what you say, but they will most certainly remember how you made them feel. So if you're modeling that behavior and showing them that you care about them, showing them that you're using your emotional intelligence as a leader to be empathetic toward them and their unique causes based on their unique lived experiences, then they will truly know that you are there for them. You got to hear your people. And whether that is hearing their moans, their groans, their cheers, their feedback, whatever it is, you need to set up mechanisms so that you are hearing from your people. So whether that is gaining anonymous feedback through a survey, having town hall meetings, or even having one-on-one discussions, you want to create an environment where people know that their voice is valued and their voice is shared and their voice can be heard. And then you got to measure what matters. You know, I had an old boss that was from the Wharton School of Business, and he always told me, Tate, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. So the same way we measure our sales and our customer response and everything else, we need to be measuring these D&I metrics that we put in place to ensure that we're doing the right thing. And we can certainly talk about what some of those look like toward the end. And then last but not least, I want to say, you know, when you're holding people accountable, you got to do the R3, and that is review, revise, and relaunch. If it doesn't work, if you need to tweak something along the way based on how you're addressing diversity and inclusion in your workspace, then don't be afraid to do that. Your statement should be you know, ever flowing and flexible so that you are changing them to accommodate your particular needs and as your organization evolve. And last but not least, I just encourage you to put in the work. It is not easy. It does not happen organically. You need to be very intentional about what this is and what this looks like for your organization. So again, don't think it's just going to sprout up overnight like a mushroom in our front yard. You have truly got to put in the work to make diversity happen in your workplace. So those are just some of my tips that I think that will be beneficial for you as you look at positioning your organization for growth and strength, by leveraging diversity and inclusion. So Alicia, I'll turn it back over to you so we can keep this thing moving along.
Yes, thank you so much, Mel, for all of that. And so I know Catherine put a few things in the chat, just some little tidbits that you dropped. So make sure you guys check that out. So Elijah, where you at? We're gonna hear what Elijah has to say, and just kind of give us some insight on what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like for entrepreneurs and business owners.
Absolutely, and I just want to thank Ms. Tate and Alicia as well for just this fantastic opportunity. I'm learning while I'm on the panel, so this is fantastic. You can go to the beginning. So picking up on the piece of put in the work, right? We've got really sort of three core things that I can share with you, right? And I have a backup as well, Catherine.
Is this the right slide, or is it on like your slide deck? Sorry.
Yeah, it's on mine.
Okay. Got that.
Number one, businesses are really important because they are the front line of quality of life. So when we talk about the places that we live, move, and have our being, right? Businesses are that. When you think about just your lived experience, right? When you think about, going to the store, conducting your daily life, you think about going to businesses. You need businesses for service. One of the things that in exploring this topic that is so interesting that I think many of us forget, the movement in Birmingham actually began as a boycott to downtown stores. And that boycott to downtown stores was because of unequal and inequitable treatment to a willing customer base. And so I use this as a jump point to say that the business role, we've heard, Ms. Tate talk so beautifully about, from a leadership perspective and a management perspective, how to implement and think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but really want to think about some of the practical ways, even as a smaller business owner, that you can begin to think about, number one, why it's important. And this is really our thesis behind why we support small businesses and communities and choose that as the reason why Urban Impact looks at it, because it's a quality of life. If you have places you can go to that you feel accepted and free, right, that enhances the community on so many levels. And so making sure that we have, as Ms. Tate said, diversity at the top of mind and putting in the work leads into this. And so I wanted to bring that as a core reason of understanding that many times, we are the front doors as entrepreneurs and business owners to our communities, right? And if we're not conscious about who we're serving, why we're serving, how we're serving, then we contribute to the culture, and that culture can be good or it can be bad. So, and that culture is also very specific to the Birmingham movement, as you see Birmingham merchants unfair. So let's go to the next slide. There are two really main points that I want to leave with you. Anyone who's seen me before knows I love this picture, so I'm always going to find a reason to put forth Fourth Avenue. But really, why should I care as a small business owner? How do I integrate it? Number one, the marketplace is diverse. It is not the same. It's not homogenous. And most people think about demographics. I'll speak to how all of these things, to think about them a little bit more dynamically and not just on a flat surface, and how that relates to your business. When you're in business to make money, right? We hope, right? And you can choose to invest those profits personally or socially. It's up to you. But in order to make that profit, you have to have a customer base, a client base. And in order to sell to that client base, you have to know who you're selling to and why you're selling. Right. So you've had a general profile of, my customer is this age, this race, this demographic. But then you also have a subset under that, which is, okay, this is the general base, but they like to come here on Tuesdays. They're downtown. And so when we think about not only sort of in technical terms, target markets and market segmentation, we also have to really think about how is all of this influencing my strategy? So when you really even to think about, well, who am I selling to? Why am I selling to them? You have to actually ask, like, who are the people and what are those intersections, right? That's also the point behind this photo. It's an intersection. This is a picture from the Taste of Fourth Avenue Jazz Festival. It's usually held on the 1700 block of Fourth Avenue North. And one thing you'll see about this picture is that it's all of Birmingham, right? It's all of Birmingham. Everyone comes to the historically Black commercial district to listen to jazz, to take in Green Acres, to take in the barbershops, to take in Jazz Hall of Fame. And so, but this may not be a recurring market though, right? It may not be a recurring market, or it could be a recurring market. And so the question is, if this is not a recurring market, and you have yet to reach a larger marketplace, or if you have sort of a contained market, the question is, why is that? The question I would pose to you as a business owner would be, what are the things in your business processes? And we'll get into the next one on the next slide, not quite yet. But what are the things in your business processes, but also just in your business look and feel that may determine how wide or narrow your market share could be? And then also understanding that the marketplace is changing. There is sort of a census chart that really just talks about, you know, the leveling out of age in consumers, right? There's also a chart that talks about people who identify in the LGBTQIA plus community. There are people that talk about, you know, there are charts that talk about, you know, just racial diversity. The market is changing, and that is something that I want to preach to every small business owner. The market is changing. It is not what it was. And so if the market is changing, you naturally have to make sure that your model is up to date with the market. Otherwise, as a professor always told me, without any marketing, there's no business. And so, and this is really important. As we talked about, we're just coming out of a moment. We're in multiple moments socially. We're in multiple moments politically. We're in multiple moments socially, and these things can be difficult to wrestle with. And I know, as even a part-time, somewhat, you know, business owner who has partners, sometimes you just want to do business, right? I just want to do business. I want to get back to normal. But it's important to understand that while you may not have to shift all of your products, all of the things, that you need to understand where the market is. Now, please do not interpret this as a capitalistic argument for doing right, right? You should do right because it's right. But I'm not here to tell you what right is. But know that if you do wrong, you will go back to being the first picture that we showed, and people will be picketing. You will lose your business. And it's really important, just as good neighbors. And that's the reason why I say go back to our community, right? Being good neighbors to our community should be the biggest thing as business owners in terms of community connectedness, right? If your customer base is say, hey, you know, you were playing that song, and I don't think that may be appropriate for a public setting because of this person's background, or you had this symbol, you had this flag, you had this thing. You should really be a good neighbor and strive to be a good neighbor so that you can continue to serve your community. And that leads to my last point on the next slide, which is diversity and equity must be a part of the 4 Ps of marketing and product design. Here I have a picture of Michael's Restaurant Turn Up that they've opened on top of the Negro League Museum. You should all go and visit Michael's Restaurant. They're fantastic. And, you know, and because it is also Birmingham Restaurant Week, or 2 week, or however we want to say that. But anyway, it's important that just as Melville stated, it has to be top of mind. you've got to integrate it. So let's take a quick second to look at what this is. You know, I use Michael's here because they are a high-end restaurant. They're not changing their particular price point. They're not changing who they are, but they're able to appeal to a market share, being right there in Parkside and Regents Field. I mean, they are a Black-owned business, but they serve everyone. And there's a notion of safety and comfort for a lot of folks. And so this is just one example, maybe a high-end example, but really think about both your product, price, place, and promotion. The other thing too, if you're a business that has product lines, right? You're a t-shirt company that has different t-shirt lines. If you are, arts company, that has that line, you have to be very mindful about the way that you promote, the way that you design the products. And it's also best to talk to your community, right? I think that a lot of times, in developing certain things, we have our own ideas, but it's good to be connected to the community, but also just think about when we talk about what Ms. Tate referenced in terms of diversity of thought, right? You're not going to get to the best possible product, with just one line of thinking, right? Even when you talk about product and services, right, which I use those interchangeably. Even at the Office of Urban Impact, we've got like 4 generations represented. We've got Gen Z to baby boomers, right? The way we approach economic development is very different. But because of that blend, we're able, and because Mr. Holloway, my executive director, has made a place where everyone is really accepted, we're able to think about things because that is part of the market that we represent. In Fourth Avenue, we have Fly V, who is a millennial, and we also have Green Acres, which is a legacy business, right? And so it helps to have people on the front line who are selling the product, who are making the product, interfacing with customers, have the diversity of thought, have sort of the diversity of demographics, and really have it top of mind. So I hope that I've been able to give you a few key points to think about of how to always integrate these things into your business, because this is really a part of your marketing strategy. This is not a separate or isolated topic. It's something of consideration so that you don't become like the businesses who are on the other side of the first picture I showed you. So thank you so much. And now we will hear from Alicia.
Thank you, Elijah. We appreciate that. That was good. So again, I know Catherine has kind of been dropping all the gems that she hears in the chat. So you guys can check out what has been said there. And so really, in this time, I want to just kind of wrap us up. And I want to also insert a little bit of my perspective and thought on really what it means to include diversity, equity in terms of being a small business owner. I really want to admonish us as a community of entrepreneurs and small business owners to cast our net beyond our traditional pools of talent. And so that's really what I want to kind of deep dive into is, so to Elijah's point, the market is changing, right? Melva let us know that, hey, diversity is not just race, is also gender. So it's also all these things. So having diversity in thought, but it's important for me to understand, for all of us to understand as business owners, that we have to cast our net beyond the traditional pool of talent. So really, what does that mean? So most of our personal networks are the same, right? We can all be honest. I can't see you, but if you raise your hand, even without your camera on, all of us have a similar network. We have people who went to the same schools, who are the same race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status. And so really that leaves us with a lot of blind spots. Because if you have the same group of people who you're pulling from in terms of talent for your business, in terms of leadership for your company or organization, you're going to be limited in the perspectives that you have. And so it's really key for us to ensure that we're opening up our eyes, opening up our networks beyond the people that are just in our small circle that we interact with every day. Yes. So because what happens if we do that, it gives us a competitive edge in our businesses. And really what I've seen, the reason why I believe the diversity is fiscally responsible is that when you have multiple people represented at the table when you're making decisions, right? So Elijah talked about the 4 P's, our product, our price, place, and promotion. When you have multiple people, a diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of race and ethnicity, sitting at the table making these decisions and trying to figure out how your business is going to move forward, it provides you with multiple perspectives and worldviews. And when those multiple perspectives are combined, you as a company, as an organization, as a small business owner, you now open yourself up for more innovation. And so I think now more than ever, we see as business owners that innovation is not an option, right? Innovation is not an option. And the more brains that you have sitting at the table, the more people you have sitting at the table who see the world differently than you do, it provides your company a competitive edge. And that's why it's fiscally responsible, because the diversity of thought sitting at the table, the diversity of gender, of race, all those things sitting at the table help you to think long-term in regard to your business and not be so short-sighted. So I really want to admonish all of us to really think, how can I intentionally get myself out of my personal networks that I'm in now? How can I expose myself to more people who are different than me so that I can have diversity at the table as my company is growing? And so Melva really told us about, hey, let's not just do it because it's trendy, right? Let's make sure that it's at the top of our minds when we're sitting down and organizing our companies. And she also said, hey, you might need to go back and reset. So if you are one of those business owners that needs to reset, that's totally fine. But you need to make sure that as you are resetting, you're thinking, who is at the table when I'm making these decisions? How can I open up my network to ensure that there are multiple people sitting at the table to help me think through this decision? Now, don't just bring them to the table for their ideas and then set them back down the side when it's time to execute. You want people at the table. They need to have leadership roles, right? When you're thinking about who is my team, your team needs to be diverse. You don't need to just bring people in and just to get their thoughts and get their opinions and say, okay, thank you, check mark, right? No, we don't want that. They need to be in leadership roles. They need to help you as you journey along within your organization, within your company, because I really believe that that provides a competitive edge. And it just is fiscally responsible because we know that the landscape is changing, to Elijah's point, right? Through the census, all these things, America is a very interesting, beautiful place, and it is changing. The landscape of people, age, race, things are changing. And so it's important to have various people at the table when you're thinking about what it really means to be diverse and what it really means to provide equity and inclusion in the workplace. And so another thing, as we're bringing these people to the table, remember, you have to ensure that you are open to the new thoughts and ideas that people are going to bring, because everyone's not going to think like you. And so that's the goal. I want to push you all not only to open up your networks, but to find people who don't think like you. It's okay if someone doesn't think like you. It is okay if we don't have the same perspective on the world. Guess what? That's what's going to make your company beautiful, and that's what's going to make it innovative, is that everyone does not think the same way. So once you get all these people to the table, once we're sitting down, we're brainstorming, we're throwing things on the wall, remember, even though they don't think like you have to create a safe place. Create a safe place. So you have someone on your team, right? You're saying, hey, okay, I'm going to really ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the top of what I'm doing, right? And so it may be diversity in race, it may be diversity in gender, diversity in thought. Remember that everyone's going to think very differently. So now when you have all these people at the table, you have to create a safe place for people to share their opinions and to share their thoughts. Because if you don't provide that safe place, now there's an issue with culture. And if you don't provide a safe place, what you're saying is that I value your opinion, but not necessarily you, right? And so we want to make sure that as we are moving in the right direction, that we not only say out of our mouths that we care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it is embedded in who we are as a business, who we are as a company, and who we are as an organization. Because the reality is, if you say it out of your mouth, right, but you don't do it in your actions, sooner or later, you will be found out, okay? So you want to be genuine and you want to be authentic in what you're doing. And it's okay to say, hey, I don't even know what I'm doing, but that's the beauty of opening up your networks, opening up your tables, opening up leadership roles to bring people to the table, because it truly is fiscally responsible to have a beautifully vast, diverse network of people at the helm of your organization. So just be open and ready for different perspectives. Be open and ready for the different approaches and how your team thinks about tackling and handling situations. Because also, not only does it open you up to ensuring that your organization is really ensuring that diversity and equity is at the helm of what you're doing, it also helps you in your marketing, right? It helps you in your messaging. It helps you in your reach. So when you have diverse people at the table, when you're trying to think about how to market your company, how to market a program that you're doing, how to message something, there are some things, no matter how hard you try, it's just not going to work coming from you, right? It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with that. It depends on who you're trying to talk to. And so that's why when you open it up, you get help from everyone at the table on how do we say this to reach who we're trying to reach? How do we market this to get who we're trying to get at the table? So it really is key to open up your personal network, right? It helps you to outperform. It includes greater profits, and it really helps you in your organization. So I really want us to just keep that top of mind. But also, one of the last things I really want to just wrap it up with is that when we talk about including diversity and equity and opening up the team, and not just saying things with our words, but also making sure that we say it in our actions, there are some things that you can embed in your company, some of your policies that you can put in place, right? Is it, more flexible work hours? Are there things with childcare? When you think about diversifying your team, think about what does this diverse team need to actually thrive? So that for me as a business owner, I'm not just saying with my mouth I care about it, but I'm actually putting in policies. I'm actually embedding into the culture of the company organization things that speak to you and speak to your needs as a team member. So I just really, 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 really want you guys to think, who is in my network? Okay, get a picture of them in your mind. More than likely, 75% of those people all look like you, all think like you, all have the same perspectives. And now I want you to intentionally set a goal for yourself to go to places. Get on, right now, it's a little hard to go to places, but get on different Zoom calls, network, whatever you can do to open up your network so that you really can include those types of people and those types of things and thoughts at your table. At the helm of your organization. And so it really helps with employee engagement, right? The turnover can be less, and you really can see higher innovation as you begin to diversify your team. And remember, just create a safe place that even if they don't think like you, it is okay. That is what's going to take you to the next level. So that's really, really what I wanted to just kind of share in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Catherine. We're going to kind of do a quick Q&A. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but if so, this is a great time to ask any questions to Melva, Elijah, and myself. So yes, and thank you all so much just for the time and the opportunity to share.
And Catherine, before you open up the Q&A, I had to turn my video off because I'm over here amen and high five and myself as Elijah and Alicia were speaking and talking about terms. So I think you guys have assembled a great panel. But Alicia, I wanted to ditto on something that you said, and it was so appropriate when you talked about making the change and the switch. Both you and Elijah talking about knowing your market. If you guys can recall the big news about the Washington football team, right? They were the Washington Redskins for so long. And then their owner a couple of years ago was asked, after a lot of push, not only from the Native American community, but other communities as well, to change the name because it was offensive. And so he said, you can tweet this, I will never change, or something just very aggressive and assertive like that, saying I would never change the name. And so if you know anything about that, last month, not only did they change the name, they still have not finalized it, but they changed the name to now be the Washington football team instead of the Washington Redskins. And just yesterday, they named a Black president, a president of the football team, the first ever. So it is time for things to change, and certainly knowing your market and who you serve. And as Alicia said, having those people at the table, you won't make mistakes like Gucci did with the offensive wear that they created, or H&M with the little monkey on the shirt and the little boy modeling it, and things of that nature. You won't go through all of that production and, you know, creative side of it without having enough voices and people there to see it and say, oh, no, 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 we don't want to do that. Yet you're going to spend the majority of your time trying to go back and make up for those mistakes. And as Elijah said, we will protest on you if you don't get it right. So Catherine, I'll turn that back over to you. But I did want to say that, and Alicia, you're right on about the changes in America. You know, there's an actual term called the browning of America and the graying of America. And by 2040, 20 years from now, we're going to look totally different as a society. And so as Elijah said, making sure that we can pivot and adjust to make sure we're accommodating our markets and where we serve and who we serve is going to be essential. So being agile enough to listen, know, and pivot to make those changes to support the markets that we're in.
Yes, that was good. And so one thing I did want to add too, just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying, Melva, is that as we are bringing people into our organizations, our businesses to help us, we have to make sure we really value people's opinions and their thought, and we value them not just in word, but in deed. And so I think that truly is the difference maker. Because like I said, you can say it with your words, but people will find you out, okay? People will find you out because the internet, and because people are more willing now than ever to share when they are not treated right, to share what's really going on within organizations. I know just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, there are a lot of employees, they get on Medium, they will write an article about you in a minute, and they will let the world know what is going on inside of your organization. And that's not how you want to be out there. Like, you don't want that to happen. And so really, when you are creating this beautiful tapestry of a team, make sure that you really value what people are saying, and you value them, and you value the perspective that they bring, although it may be different than yours, and although you may not agree with it. Because to use the example that you use, Melva, eventually you're going to have to do right. And Elijah said it so well. He's like, don't do right because it's good for capitalism. Do right because it's right. Right. And so I think just as humans, all of us want to know that we're valued. We want to know that our perspective brings a certain level of value. And so the same way that you know that what you have is great, and it brings value and asset to a team and a table, just keep that same energy when you're bringing other people into your team.
Thank you so much. We've got a great question from Ann Johnson, and they ask, how do you hire a diverse group of people without discriminating? And I'm going to add on to that because we are in unstable economic times. You know, if you had the 8 weeks of PPP, you may be facing this already. If you're extended to the 24, then maybe you're kind of facing the deadline there. Firing and letting folks go, how do you maintain that diversity while also practicing fair hiring and firing practices, essentially?
Right. I think one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to start developing a talent pipeline. Don't wait until you need a person to start hiring people. Start building those relationships right now. Goes back to what Alicia said about networking. You need to broaden your network. I'll give you a prime example. I was doing some working with a client. They were in the construction industry, and they looked up one day and all of the engineers that they'd hired came from Auburn. You know why? Because their senior engineers came from Auburn, and their engineers would go down and speak to Auburn and participate in the Auburn job fairs. And so they never had a diverse group of engineers. All of them were Auburn. Well, my thing was, 20 minutes away from Tuskegee, 30 minutes away from Tuskegee? So when you're going down there, visit Tuskegee. They have engineers too. And so you have to broaden where you look for talent to make sure you have diverse talent. Certainly when you talk about firing or letting someone go, you do have to make sure that you're following or at least reviewing Title VII to make sure that that person is not being discriminated against because of a protected characteristic under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So whether that's race, gender, ethnicity, color, you know, now we've added sexual orientation to it, thanks to the Supreme Court last month. So you need to make sure you go through that checklist. But listen, that's why I hate to give this plug, but that's why you need a good HR person, not somebody that's trying to wear 50 million hats and don't know this. I live, breathe, and eat HR so I can rattle this stuff off because that's what I do. So when you partner with the right people, whether that's external or internal, they're going to make sure that you're making those right decisions that won't jeopardize your company's reputation or financial bottom line.
If your company is too small to have an HR person in-house, are there external resources or are there resources that you can tap into that you can help guide folks to for maybe not a full-time HR person?
Yeah, so I partner with clients whether they have 5 employees all the way up to 5,000 employees. As I mentioned, a Mercedes, but Railroad Park is a client of mine. They've got less than 10 employees there, and certainly so many other small businesses within the area. So if you work with someone like me, we customize our plans to meet our clients' needs. Hey, Rev Birmingham, yeah, so they're one of them too. And so what we do is based on the number of employees and the level of activity, we find a way to work with them within their budget because everybody can't afford a certified degree HR professional that has the knowledge base that they need, but they certainly need those resources to do the right thing by their employees, their customers, and the community as well. So don't let not having the funding to hire someone to do that stop you from doing it. I would say, and I caution people with just Googling, let me just Google it. Google ain't an HR person. Google will give you a variety of responses, but you definitely need to validate that with someone else. So yeah, but there's tons of resources out there and organizations that are prepared to help small growing businesses. And I like to get in on the front end so that you're doing things right and establishing your culture the way you want it versus being reactive and trying to fix a problem that's going to cost you a lot of money and time and your reputation.
Yeah, I would just add to what Melva is saying, being proactive, and that goes down to how you represent yourself in the marketplace, right? How you represent yourself is also important on if people want to be a part of that pipeline, right? If people see things from your communications that would, cause concern, then you're already sort of, from the proactive standpoint. The other thing I would say, just from those who are seeking to hire hourly workers, particularly, I know that can be a challenge as well. I'll go back to my 4 Ps, and I see Catherine has added the 5th P, is really thinking about, and this goes back to what Alicia so eloquently said around the network. There are communities that are tied towards certain platforms that we use in communication. And we have to be conscious about that. So making sure that, if it's hourly, if it's, entry level, mid-professional, making sure it's posted in an accessible way is important, right? So that everyone can access it and it's not just in your friends' network and their civic organizations network, right? And then the other place is I can give an experience now being on this particular side. We have had, since the inception of the new, I guess, Urban Impact, one of the things we wanted to be intentional about is making sure that there were more women in the pipeline of economic development. The core staff, we have number 2 is a sister, but we wanted to do. And so a year ago, Daryl Washington in our office basically wrote a program that said we are really looking for and being intentional about. And to date, we've had like 10 women, both white, Black, Hispanic. It's been fantastic. And it's part of that intentionality. And that intentionality is not just because we had a document, but it's also because of, us talking about equity in the marketplace, right? And that goes back to both what Melvin and Alicia said. You can't talk about equity and not be about equity, right? So those students who saw that, they came to test it, right? And making sure that you have a qualified pool of applicants, going back to what you said, Melva, um, what you talked about with Jason Wright being hired as the first Black president. One of the things he said on First Take yesterday, is that he was also the best in the pool, right? He felt. His brother's Booth School of Business, Northwestern University, played basketball. You can't get So I think both in your messaging, intentionality, those what I would share. So fantastic on that.
And then too, just to add to that as well, and it really just summarizes what everyone has said. It's, you may be trying to figure out how to afford it depending on the size of your company, but it's never too early to decide who you're going to be. Right. And so I think that with what you have right now, you can decide who you are as an organization, what your stance is, and you can begin to visualize and write down, what do you want your team to look like? What is the culture of that organization? And so it's never too early to decide who you're going to be. So that's something that you can do before you hire Melvin.
If I'm looking at the question correctly, maybe I see Aunt Johnson. Is that a question that's really talking about what they can say legally in the job announcement? If I'm interpreting that question correctly, as I'm seeing the exchange in the chat, because I think that is a good question.
I agree. I think it's broad, and that comes to, there are legal as well as marketing and ethical, moral decisions that get to be made around that. And that's one of the reasons it's so important to hire and work with somebody that is fairly local, that you can get that specialized, okay, here is not just the legal aspects of how we do business and fair hiring practices in Birmingham, but they know the geography as well enough to say, here are the HBCUs in the area that you can diversify your staff or pipeline around. Here are the colleges that have internship programs or who specialize in areas that you may not be exposing your business and clientele to at the moment. So having that knowledge of local and legal practices, as well as the local resources available to help. Somebody from out of state isn't necessarily going to know Nichelle Nix from the Governor's Office of Minority Business Affairs, who can, extend all sorts of resources to your businesses. And so having that local knowledge and those local roots is really important, because to kind of put a point to this, I've got about 1,500 clients in the Central West Alabama area, and personnel is your most important competitive advantage. It is the one that is hardest to copy. Even if one of your employees leaves, or you have to let them go or furlough them and they find a different place to work, the relationship that the new employer is going to have with them is different. And so cultivating that culture starts with you. It's easiest when you're the only one in that business. It gets more difficult as you hire and expand. It gets more difficult as our brains are crowded with stressful environmental factors like COVID. And so having that external advisor who can say, look, right now it feels more safe to just hire folks that have those relationships, but at the same time, the direction of the market says that it's not the most sustainable choice for your business. So both hiring, I think the question is fairly diverse. There are so many components of it that we're, limited mostly in time to get into. And it is something that you should talk to somebody offline about your specific business needs, because it is so important to each and every business. Okay, let's see. Awesome. Are there any more questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself. While we're waiting for those last one or two questions, I wanted to just, ask, we had mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, measuring diversity. What are some metrics that y'all use for measuring diversity, and how do you sort of count your progress towards a goal?
Yeah, so I'll take that from an internal standpoint, from a leadership. The recommendations that I have is, set metrics around not only hiring, who are you hiring, who are you interviewing? So let me back up. Who are you interviewing? Do you have a diverse pool to interview, to select from? Who are you hiring? And then who are you promoting? But here's the one that oftentimes some managers or organizations forget about. What's your retention rate? Because it's one thing to get them in the door, because you're hiring for a diverse characteristic. We need more women. We need more minorities in this area. But what are you doing to include them? So, I've heard the term, it's like diversity is being invited to the dance, but inclusion is being asked to dance, right? And so are you allowing them to dance to your music in your environment? And so that is, look at Catherine. So that's one of the big ones that you need to measure is retention. And so the same way we have those metrics around sales and customer support and marketing that we may rate our leaders on, diversity and inclusion needs to be one of those as well.
Awesome. So there was a question about whether the presentation will be available for replay. We're going to make the slides available through the email after the presentation, and then we will be making, I believe we'll be making the actual recording of the presentation available, but we're still sort of working out the tech on that. So Taylor says yes, so we're all following Taylor on this one. So the replay will be available to rewatch. And again, these presentations are really here just to introduce the topics, introduce the experts, and introduce the resources to help you rebound, because rebounding is not about what you do today and tomorrow. It's about what happens over the next 5, 10 years, decades, right? We don't want to end up back in that black and white picture, but we will if we have to, right? So that is the importance of the feedback and being part of this ecosystem. As business owners, you create culture and you get to drive that. And so it's important for us to know where you want us to provide more resources, as well as what kind of resources we can have to support you. So thank you everyone so much for participating. Thank you so much for Elijah, Melva's, and Alicia's amazing presentations and input and thoughtful answers to all the questions today. We will see you on the next one. We've got presentations just about every Tuesday and Thursday, so please check us out at Rebound Birmingham. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.